January 1st, 2024, and Hamas leader is now confirmed finished. Yahya Sinwar is gone. He's irrelevant. It is now 100% certain. You may not be able to see it yet because mainstream media is lazy, but in this video, I'll show you why. So by the time you finish watching this, it's going to be pretty evident why this man is gone. Now look, Yahya Sinwar was the shot caller and the boss and the guy who makes every single important decision in that organization for years. This organization has two basic wings. One is the political wing, led by Khalid Mashal, Ismail Haniyeh, Musa Abu Marzouk, but they are away. They're in exile. They're in Qatar or in Turkey. They don't have any real power. They have a lot of money, but this guy, Yahya Sinwar, he's in Gaza, he's on location, and he owns and controls every single gun in the Gaza Strip. So he holds all the military power, he holds the admiration of his people, and he is the guy who makes every single decision. For him, the political wing of Hamas is nothing but figureheads. They're a waste of space. He hates them. He treats them like necessary evil. But he knows he'll make every single decision. And after October 7th, that horrible terror attack on Israel, he got stronger. That made him even more popular. They watched him become this new Salah ad-Din, the guy who beat the Jews, the guy who gave it to the Israelis. Now, it doesn't matter that this was a terror attack on civilians, babies, toddlers, women, and elderly and octogenarians. It didn't matter, but in the eyes of the Palestinian radicals, in the eyes of the Hamas members, he was a semi-god. He was a demigod. But it all backfired, and somehow he screwed it up, and now he is irrelevant, he is finished, and he is in his final days. And while there's many reasons to why Sinwar is finished, why he became irrelevant, and he is on his final days, but it all stems from the results of the ground operation of the Israelis in Gaza. Look, there's 10 things that happened in Gaza over the past few months that have sealed his fate. Number one, his decision to agree to a ceasefire in which he released some of the hostages in return for a few ceasefire days from the Israelis. Hamas now views this as a complete failure. In that ceasefire, they couldn't get anything done to actually give them any strategic advantages. They couldn't prepare any surprises, they couldn't stop the IDF, and their anticipation that the world will make this temporary ceasefire into something more permanent completely failed. Nothing happened out of the ceasefire except Hamas giving up half of its bargaining chips in their eyes. So that one is a failure that is on his name. Number two, North Gaza is completely gone. It's finished. There's no roads, there's no sewage, there's no electricity, there's no infrastructure. Most buildings are demolished, and even the buildings that are remaining are so heavily damaged, they'll need to be demolished and rebuilt completely. It's going to take a decade to rebuild North Gaza. That thing is worse than Dresden, and his name is on top of that. 1 million people have lost their homes, have lost all the infrastructure, and are now living in tents for God knows how long because of his decision to actually carry out a horrible terror attack against the Israelis. And also to embed his soldiers, his installations inside schools, inside the markets, inside homes. So he is the one who's responsible. And a lot of the Gazans are not looking at him some sort of a messiah, some sort of a savior, some sort of a protector. A lot of Gazans are now pointing the finger at Hamas and specifically at Sinwar, saying, you did this to us. Now, obviously, they hate the Israelis, but he's also part of the parties that they now look at as the ones who made this happen. Now, in South Gaza, things are a little bit better, but it's still pretty crappy. In South Gaza, now you have 2 million refugees literally living in tents, no food security, no water security. God knows how much they have to live in these tents. And on top of it, you have 20,000 dead already. A lot of them were Hamas members, but I'm saying that a lot of these people in Gaza are starting to get angry at Sinwar for making this happen. Now, the total collapse of the entire infrastructure of Hamas civilian organization is also contributing to this, because Hamas used to pick up the trash, used to be the police, used to be the health ministry, used to be the education ministry. All of this is gone. No sewage, no trash. The entire civilian infrastructure of Hamas is gone. So Hamas isn't providing to these people anything right now besides death. And his name, again, is on it. Now, on top of it, since the IDF completely took over North Gaza and destroyed Han Yunis, which was the headquarters of Hamas, any command and control center of Hamas is gone. There's no centralized command centers. There's no strategy. It's basically singular assets going around with RPGs and IEDs trying to kill specific IDF soldiers. There's nothing strategically that they can do to try and push IDF away. The war is lost. Yes, he has a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people running around with RPGs, and they will cause a lot of damage. but strategically, he has no command centers, he has no control over what's going on the ground. So on top of the civilian side, massive parts of the Hamas military wing is also collapsing, surrendering, and giving up because they no longer believe there's a central command anywhere. Now, on top of it, the Hamas brand around the world is finished. Nobody's going to contribute and donate to Hamas anymore. Obviously, there's some lunatics who love this, but the normal sane people who donated to Hamas as a charity, as an organization that did dawah and did education and healthcare in Gaza, that all is gone. 80% of the donations to Hamas have been basically eliminated with what he did. Nobody wants to be associated with this brand anymore. With the exception of maybe Turkey and maybe Qatar, nobody will deal with Hamas anymore. And that's not even the worst of it. His worst strategic mistake, and the one that everybody's blaming him for, is the reliance on the Iranians. He thought, and he was led to believe by the Iranians, that when he invades Israel and starts this shit up, the Iranians will join in through Hezbollah and attack Israel from the north, allowing this ring of fire around Israel to start a whole new holy war against Israel and cause a strategic defeat. But you know what they say, we plan and God laughs. In this case, Sinwar planned and the Iranians laughed. They basically said, no way, Jose, we're not helping you. It's your project. You do you, we're going to do us. Hezbollah never helped them. They never started a real second front. So basically now it's evident that the Iranians use Sinwar and Hamas to taint Israel, to get Israel to go to Gaza and do things that will make them undesirable to the Saudis as potential partners. And they've sacrificed Hamas in the process. And he's the guy who got played. So not only he caused a lot of damage in Gaza, not only displaced people, not only he made a huge mistake with the first hostage deal, he also got played by the Iranians, so not that smart. And on top of that, he literally pulled the United States back into the Middle East full force after the US was trying to leave the Middle East for years. They're now back in full force. The Palestinian Authority is not cooperating with this war whatsoever. In fact, they're cooperating with the Americans and the Israelis. Nothing from Hezbollah, nothing from anywhere to show any sort of achievement. His people are displaced, they're hungry, they're homeless, their infrastructure is gone, there's no horizon for this thing. And somehow, despite making every single critical mistake in the book, he still had one chance. Somehow the Israelis gave him a chance to survive, and he failed to take it. The Israelis gave him a deal. They basically said, look, let's make a deal, a second deal for more hostages, for more ceasefire days. Let us give you something, you give us something. And he said, no, we're going all the way. I'm not giving you a single more hostage until you back out completely out of Gaza and admit defeat. And the reason is because he's hung up on the first exchange. That first exchange is now viewed as a huge, colossal mistake, as a failure. So he's like, I'm not doing that mistake again. But that was his only chance to survive, because making that deal would have allowed them to release Marwan Barghouti. Now, Marwan Barghouti is sitting in the Israeli prison, but Marwan Barghouti is actually the biggest opposition to the current Palestinian Authority administration from Fatah, the actual political movement that holds the Palestinian Authority, and he's very friendly with Hamas. He's very cooperative with Hamas. So the right play would have been for Sinwar to agree to this deal, get some ceasefire days, get some humanitarian aid for his people so they can see he's doing something for them, and also on top of that, get Marwan Barghouti out of the Israeli prison back into West Bank so he can actually form an opposition and beat and take the control of the Palestinian Authority from Mahmoud Abbas. Because Marwan Barghouti is extremely popular, but more so, he's very friendly with Hamas. And he always talks about cooperating between the Fatah and between Hamas in a joint leadership. He doesn't believe in separation. So that would have been the right play. Poison pill. Because the Americans are trying to build a new Palestinian Authority, a one that will take over Gaza. That Palestinian Authority is led by Mahmoud Abbas and his crew. If you throw a poison pill into the Palestinian Authority, in the image of Marwan Barghouti, you ruin that and you leave no political option to the Americans, to the Israelis, without working with Hamas. But now that's gone. He refused to make that deal. He said, no, not a single hostage until all of you, every single soldier is out. He's basically saying, no, we're going all in on this. That is impossible. Because for Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, that is political death. He would have been over. So he put Benjamin Netanyahu in the corner. And that corner basically means now he has no choice but to go full force and destroy Hamas and destroy Sinwar. So Sinwar has made multiple mistakes, even though he was usually pretty good at judging the Israelis. But I think he failed to understand this new play after October 7th, and he miscalculated every single step along the way. Now, the political wing in Hamas are looking at this and saying, well, this is a good opportunity for us, right? We had a massive rupture with this guy, but we couldn't do nothing because he held the military, he held the power. Military is now obliterated. The Israelis killed almost everybody. The command and control centers are gone. He has no real power anymore. He's just a figurehead. We can take all of this back. Now, we can go and work with the Palestinian Authority and keep the gravy train going. We'll stay away. We'll stay in Qatar. We'll continue being billionaires. The Palestinian Authority will pay us for the kind of approval we give it. All we have to do is just sit there and say we agree to the Palestinian Authority and we are part of it somehow. We're going to get paid. We're going to give our name as a legitimacy tool for the Palestinian Authority. And they'll go in and they'll control Gaza and we'll get to keep our great life. And somehow, maybe in the future, Hamas will get involved again. We'll live to fight another day. But Sinwar is saying, no. Destruction is irrelevant. Death is irrelevant. As long as I survive, this war is not won by the Israelis. Even if every single Gazan is dead, every single house is ruined. But if I survive, the Israelis have lost. And I'm going to keep going all the way through, even if I need to escape to Egypt with a few hostages to make sure they don't kill me. So he's looking at it from a completely maniacal point of view because he's not a pragmatist. He's a completely irrational player. Now, look. About 10 days ago, Musa Abu Marzouk, the political wing operator that is not in Gaza right now, says that they'll recognize the state of Israel, that they'll work with the Palestinian Authority, that there's no choice, things that are completely maniacal if you're a Hamas member. Now, he said that because they're prepping the ground to working with the Palestinian Authority. Now, immediately right after, Sinwar comes out and says, hell no. But despite Sinwar's ultimatum, the entire political wing kept on going. For the past 10 days, they've been engaged in negotiating with the Israelis, with the Americans, and with the potential of building a new hostage release deal above Sinwar's head. So despite Sinwar saying no, they are currently in Cairo as we speak. The entire political wing is in Cairo trying to negotiate a hostage deal despite Sinwar saying that's not going to happen. So he lost every single ounce of clout and influence he has because even the political leaders now understand that he is relevant. Now look, 30 days ago, I told you, Qatar has lost its relevance. And by losing its relevance, it is a huge mistake by Sinwar. Sinwar did something that caused the Qataris to look completely moronic. And that pushed the Egyptians as the new mediator. And I've told you 30 days ago, it's a huge mistake by Sinwar. It's a huge win for the Israelis. I'm going to play the clip in a second. But what I told you, that this is a pure Israeli game. Look at where the current hostage deal is being negotiated. The entire negotiations are happening in Egypt, not in Qatar. I told you 30 days ago, it switched before everybody in the mainstream media noticed this. So Hamas just unintentionally gave away the win to the Israelis. It's absolutely insane. They've made a critical mistake that may have cost them this war. Now, as you know, the Israelis and Hamas are currently in a state of ceasefire. Now, that ceasefire may last anywhere from 4 days to 10 days. As long as Hamas keeps releasing hostages, the Israelis are going to say, go right ahead. So yesterday, at 4 p.m. local time, Hamas was supposed to release some hostages. But they didn't. They didn't, and they've delayed. And they've delayed them all the way to midnight for 8 hours. Now, the reason for the delay was perceived on the Israeli side as yet another power play by Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, to show to the Israelis that he's calling the shots, that he's the guy who decides exactly what happens. It's a power play to show them who's boss. And it may have been the case, but it absolutely backfired. Because what happened is that the Qataris started to scramble after this thing got delayed because it's their cachet, it's their clout, it's their reputation because they're the mediators between the Israelis and Hamas. And when Hamas basically breaks the deal, the Qataris are the ones who look bad. So Qataris start to scramble for hours, but can't get nothing done. And the reason they couldn't get nothing done is because Yahya Sinwar basically has nothing that he owes to them. Qataris basically have no leverage over Hamas. But until yesterday, that point was not exposed because Hamas played ball with what the Qataris asked. But the moment Hamas wanted to break bad and to show Israelis who's boss, they've exposed to the rest of the world that Qataris don't matter here. They've lost their leverage. So they bumped Qatar out of this because the ones who stepped into the shoes of Qatar after a few hours of nowhere is the Egyptians.
The Egyptians stepped in and they basically solved this within a matter of a few hours. So why did the Hamas listen to the Egyptians but not to the Qataris? And why does it mean Hamas may have just lost the war? Well, look, the Egyptians, unlike Qatar, actually do have leverage, and a significant one, over Hamas. They control all the gasoline that goes into Gaza, and also they control the tunnels. Yes, some tunnels are still active between Gaza and Egypt. If things get too hectic, if things get too hot, he's going to escape through these tunnels to Egypt and make itself disappear. So the Egyptians basically now have come out on top and replaced de facto the Qataris in this negotiation. While the Qataris may stay in front of this and may seem like they're the ones leading this, they're just a puppet right now. They're a rubber stamp. The ones who are calling the shots are the Egyptians. And let me explain you why changing the mediators from Qatar to Egypt de facto was a huge mistake. Hamas just did it, I think accidentally, unintentionally, but by switching it to the Egyptians, they screwed up. Because the Egyptians' interests are a whole lot different than the Qataris. The Egyptians want Hamas gone.
Now, I also said that how will you know when Hamas is finally finished in its current configuration? When the Egyptians will take an active part in working out the day after. And now it's happening. Egypt is now the mediator, they're now the negotiator, they're now taking an active part in making the new government, in making the new leaders, and this is exactly the sign we've been waiting for to see that Hamas is finished. Let me play the clip where I told you a month ago that this would happen.
So Egypt is going to sit there, specifically Assisi is going to sit there, and he wants to make sure that Hamas is actually dead, that it cannot hurt anymore. Hamas is finished, 100% dead like a cockroach, and only then, only once he knows and once Egypt accepts that Hamas is dead and it cannot come back to revenge and to meddle and to do all this crap in Egypt, then we'll know that Hamas is finished.
Now, the Israelis are about to finish taking the entire Gaza Strip. They got the north, they will take the south. So what I think happens next is the Israelis take the Philadelphia route and they cut off any option of smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip to prevent any arming of whoever is now in Gaza. Number two, they'll build a buffer zone, a security strip on the other side to prevent anybody coming close to the fence. Now, the second thing they want to avoid is Vietnamization of Gaza. Now, they're not going to sit there for years waiting for IEDs and grenades and RPGs. They're going to try to put a security force in there and get the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible. Now, obviously, right now, it seems like the US is very adamant about putting the Palestinian Authority in there with some security force. I think it's a mistake. I think there's better ideas, like the cantonization of Gaza, but I'm not the one making the decisions. I've made a video explaining how I think that can work. But right now, it seems that the select idea is the Palestinian Authority will get in there and, control the ground. Now, the Israelis will have security access all along Gaza, much like they have right now in the West Bank. They'll go in and out whenever they need to, and the entire Gazan government will be subject to Israeli control, much like it is on the West Bank. It's a similar model. There's not going to be any military forces in Gaza. And the Israelis, with the Palestinian Authority, with some foreign money, are going to take another 10 years to rebuild the Gaza Strip as a satellite state next to Israel, much like West Bank, and hopefully not to have that happen again. Whatever happens, and whatever happens with Sinwar, whether he dies, whether he flees, it doesn't really matter because his days as the leader of Hamas is finished. So whether the Israelis kill him or not is not relevant. But what is relevant is that Iran is next. And the Israelis' plan to break apart Iran into a million little pieces is something I made a video right here. Go check it out. Tell me what you think. If you haven't yet, subscribe right here. And obviously, as you know, these videos are not fully monetized. So right here, we have access to our Patreon. You can sign up to support this channel. And I put some articles on there, some videos, some exclusive stuff for the guys who are actually supporting this and the girls, obviously. Thank you so much. Have a great 2024. I'll see you soon.